Summer, 1985. Los Angeles didn't sleep. Hardware stores ran out of deadbolts. Gun sales doubled. Families took turns staying awake at night watching doors, windows, and driveways. Why? Because somewhere out there a man dressed in black was slipping into homes like a shadow. They called him the Night Stalker, a killer who didn't just murder, he hunted. Richard Ramirez was not born a monster. He was molded into one. He grew up in El Paso, Texas, in a home where violence was part of daily life. His father, Julian, had a volcanic temper. The smallest mistake could lead to a beating. But the deepest damage came from his cousin, Miguel Mike Ramirez, a decorated Green Beret who had just returned from Vietnam. Mike was different after the war. He would take young Richard into his room, close the door, and show him Polaroids he'd taken overseas. Women tied up, tortured, mutilated, some alive, some dead. Richard was 12 years old, sitting on a bed, staring at images of real human beings brutalized beyond recognition, while his cousin described it like it was a story of conquest. Violence became tied to power in his mind. Then, in 1973, that lesson turned into something far more real. During a heated argument with his wife Jessie, Miguel pulled out a revolver and shot her in the face. Richard was standing right there. The gunshot cracked through the room. Jessie collapsed. Blood spread across the floor, dark and thick, inching toward Richard's shoes. The man he idolized had just proven something. You could take a life, and the world didn't stop. For Richard, something either broke or finally snapped into place. By the early 1980s, Richard left Texas and drifted to California, lived in cheap motels, abandoned buildings, and borrowed cars. He spent his nights high on cocaine, listening to a CDC's Night Prowler on repeat, reading Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible, and obsessing over occult imagery. He wasn't just surviving, he was building an identity, a persona wrapped in darkness, violence, and Satanism. And by 1984, that persona was ready to act. June 27, 1984, Glassell Park, Los Angeles. 17-year-old Jenny Vinco lived alone in a small apartment. The next morning, her son found her body. She had been sexually assaulted, stabbed repeatedly, and nearly decapitated. Her apartment was ransacked. Investigators noticed something chilling about the scene. A window screen had been cut open. No smashed doors, no loud break-in. Whoever did this knew how to move silently. The case went cold. But this was not a one-time crime. It was the first sign of what was coming. March 17, 1985. Rosemead, California. Maria Hernandez pulled into her garage when a man in a black baseball cap appeared and raised a gun, fired. The bullet hit her car keys and deflected. She survived. Inside the condo, her roommate Dale Okazaki wasn't as lucky. He shot her in the forehead at close range. An hour later, in Monterey Park, 30-year-old Cillian Veronica Yu was dragged from her car and shot multiple times. 2 murders, 1 survivor. 3 attacks in a single night, and Richard Ramirez was just getting started. Over the next 6 months, he attacked people across Los Angeles, the San Gabriel Valley, and even up in San Francisco. There was no pattern. He targeted elderly couples and young women. He used guns, knives, cords, lamps, and tire irons. Some victims were shot, others were stabbed or beaten. Some were sexually assaulted, others were robbed and left alive. At several scenes, he drew pentagrams on the walls or forced survivors to swear to Satan. He didn't want just control over his victims. He wanted to create a legend. The randomness made him impossible to predict. There was no type, no safe neighborhood. Anyone could be next. By summer 1985, Los Angeles was a city under siege. People who had slept with their windows open for decades suddenly started nailing them shut. Locksmiths were booked for weeks. Bars went up on windows in suburbs that had never known that kind of fear. News stations ran nightly segments. How to protect your home as the Night Stalker in your area. Parents had their children sleep in the same room. Some families slept in shifts, so someone was always awake. The Night Stalker wasn't just a killer. He had become a psychological weapon. Detectives worked around the clock, but the case felt like chasing smoke. Different weapons, different victim types, different locations. Nothing about it fit the normal profile of a serial killer. Then they noticed a clue almost everyone else would have missed: a footprint. At multiple scenes, they found the same distinctive shoe print, an Avia aerobic sneaker, size 11.5. Only about 1,354 pairs of that specific model had been sold in California. It was a thin lead, but it was something. Then came the real break. After an attack in Mission Viejo, Ramirez stole an orange Toyota and later abandoned it. Inside, investigators found fingerprints. They ran them through the system. The name that came back, Richard Ramirez, 25 years old, already in the system for car theft, drugs, and burglary. On August 30th, 1985, his mugshot was printed on front pages across California with one message: "This is the Night Stalker." Ramirez had been out of town and didn't realize his face was everywhere. On August 31st, he returned to Los Angeles. He walked into a liquor store in East LA and noticed people staring, not the usual glance, a look of recognition. He saw his own face on a newspaper. Panic hit him. He ran. He tried to carjack a woman. She fought and screamed. Neighbors rushed in. He fled down the street looking for another car, another way out. By now, dozens of people were chasing him. Neighbors with bats, metal rods, whatever they could grab. They tackled him in the street and beat him until the police arrived. For the first time, the Night Stalker felt what his victims had felt. Fear, helplessness, the realization that there was no escape. The reign of terror was over. Not because of a dramatic police raid, but because an entire community refused to let him escape. Ramirez's trial looked more like a spectacle than a typical courtroom case. He walked in wearing sunglasses and smirking. He flashed a pentagram carved into his palm. At one point he said to reporters, "I am beyond good and evil." But inside the courtroom, survivors testified. Families of victims spoke. The forensic evidence, the fingerprints, the ballistics, the eyewitnesses, it stacked up against him, piece by piece. He was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, 14 burglaries, and sentenced to death 19 times, the most death sentences ever given to one person in California at that time. But the state never got the chance to execute him. In 2013, after 23 years on death row, Richard Ramirez died of complications from B-cell lymphoma at the age of 53 in a prison hospital. No final speech, no dramatic last words. Just a quiet end for a man who once held millions of people in fear. This was the story of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, a predator who turned Los Angeles into his hunting ground, and the story of a city that, in the end, helped hunt him down. From terrified neighbors locking their windows, to a crowd in East LA refusing to let him escape, it wasn't just the system that stopped him, which was the people he thought would always be afraid. If you want more deep dives into the minds and histories of the world's most notorious criminals, Subscribe because there are many more stories to uncover.